It's nighttime at the end of a long race course in a crowded capital. Fire catches among the shops packed against the turn, stalls stocked with goods that burn easily. Wind pushes the flames along the open track. There is nothing here to stop them. No gap, no stone, and no clear ground. The blaze runs the full length of the course and climbs toward the hills above. Welcome to Same Day, Different Century. I'm Zach. Today is July 18th. The racecourse is the Circus Maximus, and the capital is Rome in the year 64 AD. It's the largest city in the Roman Empire, and perhaps the largest in the Western Mediterranean, home to about 1 million people. A size few European cities would rival again for more than 1,000 years. And almost everything about how it was built made it ready to burn. Rome had grown without a plan. Its poor lived in apartment blocks stacked several stories high, their lower floors sometimes brick or stone, their upper floors timber, their interiors packed with wooden furniture, cloth, and oil lamps. The streets between them ran narrow and crooked, some barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Cooking fires, braziers, and open flames burned throughout countless cramped rooms. Ground floor shops stored the goods of a trading empire, much of it flammable. In the dry heat of a Roman July, the city was tinder waiting on a spark. Fire was no stranger here. Blazes broke out constantly, and the Emperor Augustus had founded a professional brigade, the Vigiles, 7 cohorts of watchmen, several thousand strong, who patrolled with buckets, pumps, and hooks for pulling down buildings. They fought house fires most nights. What they were about to face was something else. The man who ruled all of this was Nero. He had come to power a decade earlier, at age 16, and by 64 AD he was in his mid-20s and secure on the throne. His reign already carried dark episodes, most notoriously the killing of his own mother 5 years before. He fancied himself an artist, a singer and charioteer, tastes the Roman elite found beneath the dignity of an emperor. When the fire began, he was not even in the city. He was some 35 miles down the coast at Antium, the town of his birth. Almost everything we know about that night comes from 3 Roman writers, and none was an eyewitness. The historian Tacitus, our best source, was a small child in the year 64 and wrote his account roughly half a century later. Suetonius and Cassius Dio came later still, and both were more openly hostile to Nero's memory. Their distance matters, because much of what has come down to us about this fire is not fact, but the rumor that hardened around it. What none of them disputes is where and when it started. On the night of the 18th of July, fire broke out in the shops at the end of the Circus Maximus nearest the Palatine and Caelian hills. According to Tacitus, it began among stalls holding flammable wares, and the wind carried it. The circus offered it a running start. Long, open, lined with wood, and without the walls or temple enclosures that might elsewhere have broken a fire's path, the racecourse let the flames build and spread down its whole length before racing into the packed streets beyond. From there, the mechanics were simple and merciless. Narrow lanes funneled the heat. Timber upper floors carried the fire roof to roof. There were few effective fire breaks, and the twisting streets that had grown up over centuries gave the flames 100 paths, and the people fleeing them almost none. Tacitus describes crowds trapped between fire advancing on one side, and fire that had somehow got behind them on the other. He adds a darker detail, that some men openly threw torches and blocked those trying to fight the flames, claiming they acted under orders. Though whether they truly did, or simply wanted to loot undisturbed, he could not say. It burned for 6 days before it was finally checked, and it was checked not with water, but with demolition, pulling down a broad belt of buildings so the flames would reach bare ground and starve. And then, just as the city exhaled, the fire broke out again on an estate belonging to Tigellinus, Nero's praetorian commander. Tacitus says this time it took fewer lives, but tore through temples and porticos and stirred far more anger. When it was over, Tacitus reports that of Rome's 14 districts, only 4 stood intact. 3 had been leveled to the ground. The remaining 7 were reduced to scorched and broken ruins. Remarkably, no ancient source records how many people died. Some Romans noted a grim coincidence in the calendar. The fire had begun, they calculated, on very nearly the same day of the year that a Gallic army had captured and burned Rome some 4.5 centuries earlier. a date already marked in Roman memory as one of disaster. So where was Nero? The hostile tradition gives the answer everyone remembers, that he watched Rome burn and sang. The image of Nero fiddling is pure anachronism. Bowed instruments like the fiddle would not exist for another 1,000 years. What Tacitus actually records is a rumor, and he flags it as a rumor, that as the city burned, Nero mounted a private stage and sang of the fall of Troy, comparing that ancient catastrophe to the one before him. The historical Nero did something less theatrical. He came back from Antium, only, Tacitus notes, once the fire neared his own palace, and with the city still burning, he opened the public monuments and even his own gardens to the homeless, brought in emergency food from Ostia, and cut the price of grain. Tacitus records these measures plainly. He also records that they won Nero no gratitude, because a belief had already taken hold that the emperor himself had ordered the city set alight. Suetonius and Dio state flatly that Nero had the fire started, to clear the crowded old city and build something grander. Tacitus, more careful, writes that his sources give both accounts, accident or the emperor's guilt, and declines to resolve it. Most modern historians lean toward accident. Fires of this kind were common in Rome. Nero was 35 miles away when it began, and the flames destroyed Nero's own residence, the Domus Transitoria, along with treasures he could never replace. But the suspicion was not baseless, and what Nero built next did nothing to quiet it. Faced with a rumor he could not extinguish, Nero, in Tacitus' account, looked for someone to blame, and settled on a small, obscure, and widely disliked religious sect, the Christians. This passage in Tacitus is one of the earliest surviving references to Christianity by a Roman historian, and the earliest to describe this persecution. Tacitus reports that they were arrested in large numbers and put to death with deliberate cruelty as public spectacle, torn apart by dogs, nailed to crosses, and set alight to serve as torches in Nero's own gardens. And here Tacitus notes something striking. Even Romans who despised the Christians, he writes, began to pity them, because it was plain they were dying not for the public good but to feed one man's cruelty. Then came the rebuilding, and this is where Nero's response reshaped the city for centuries. The new Rome rose to a code. Streets were laid out wider and straighter. Building heights were capped. Buildings were required to be widely separated so fire could not spread as easily. Fire-resistant stone was required in place of timber. Buildings had to keep firefighting equipment on hand, and the public water supply was protected from private diversion. Much of this is recognizably the ancestor of a modern building code, but he also cleared a vast tract of the burned center for himself. On it he built the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a sprawling palace of gardens, porticos, an artificial lake, and a colossal bronze statue of himself. Suetonius claims that when it was finished, Nero remarked he would at last begin to live like a human being. To many Romans, that project looked like motive. Whatever the truth about the fire's origin, an emperor who answered catastrophe by seizing the ruins for a private palace confirmed the worst they already believed about him. That belief helped end him. The Golden House, the financial burdens of rebuilding, and Nero's increasingly unpopular rule all contributed to the growing resentment that 4 years later left him abandoned by the army and the Senate and dead by suicide at age 30. The Flavians who followed were quick to bury his memory. The Golden House was stripped and built over, and on the side of its lake the Flavian emperors raised a public amphitheater the world now knows as the Colosseum. Nearly 2,000 years later, we still say someone fiddles while Rome burns. A phrase for callous leaders ignoring a crisis, built on an instrument that didn't exist and a scene the careful sources reported only as gossip. The fire was real. Its dead were real. The code written to prevent the next was real. What survived most stubbornly was the rumor. That same day, different century. I'm Zach. We'll be back tomorrow with another date, another story. Thanks for listening. Hey guys, it's Zach. Real quick before you go, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed the show, all I ask is that you share it with someone that you think would enjoy it too. That's the best way to help us out. I'll see you tomorrow.